My son's face drained of color the moment he scrolled through my contacts. 5 minutes. That's all it took for 15 years of careful secrets to unravel. I'd left my phone unlocked on the kitchen counter while I stepped outside to sign for a package. When I returned, Jake was standing there, phone in hand, looking at me like I was a stranger. "Mom, who's Elizabeth Morgan?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. The name hung in the air between us. Elizabeth Morgan, the woman I had been hiding from my entire adult life. The woman who gave birth to me, then sold me for drug money when I was 4 years old. The grandmother my children never knew existed. I never planned on telling them about her, about my past. But as I looked into my son's confused eyes, I realized my carefully constructed life was about to come crashing down, and maybe it needed to. Growing up in foster care in rural Pennsylvania isn't something I talk about. Not with my husband Mark, not with our 3 children, not even with the other PTA moms who think I came from some stable middle-class family in Ohio. I've spent 20 years building the perfect suburban life in Alexandria, Virginia. Volunteer work, book club meetings, soccer games, and summer vacations to Rehoboth Beach. I became everything my birth mother wasn't. My kids, Jake, 15, Emma, 12, and Lily, 8, know me as the organized mom who bakes cookies for school functions and never misses a parent-teacher conference. Mark sees me as the stable partner he met in college, the one with the steady accounting job and practical outlook on life. Nobody sees the nightmares that still wake me at 3 a.m. or knows why I flinch when someone raises their voice. I was 7 when the Petersons took me in, my 5th foster home in 3 years. Mrs. Peterson found me hiding in the closet after I'd wet the bed, terrified I'd be sent away again. Instead of yelling, she sat on the floor next to me, not touching, just waiting until I was ready to come out. "Everyone makes mistakes, Samantha," she said. "It doesn't make you bad." They were the first people who made me feel safe. When I was 13, my social worker, Denise, told me they wanted to adopt me. That same week, Elizabeth showed up, clean for the first time in years, demanding visitation rights. I remember sitting in a sterile government office, wearing the new dress Mrs. Peterson had bought me, while Elizabeth talked about how much she'd changed. The judge granted her supervised visits. 3 weeks later, she showed up high to our second meeting, screamed at Denise, and disappeared again. The adoption went through, but the damage was done. I learned that even when things seem safe, the ground can shift beneath you without warning. The Petersons gave me everything: stability, education, love, but I could never shake the feeling that I was different, damaged somehow. When I met Mark in college, I told him my parents had died in a car accident when I was 16. It was easier than explaining the truth. Easier than admitting I came from nothing, from addiction and abandonment. The lie grew as our relationship deepened. I created fictional grandparents, childhood stories, all carefully constructed to hide the truth. I haven't seen Elizabeth since that failed visitation, but I've kept tabs on her over the years, a habit I can't break. I know she's been in and out of rehab, has 2 more children she lost custody of, and most recently has been living in a halfway house in Baltimore, just an hour away from my perfect suburban home. I keep her number in my phone under her full name, not Mom, because she never earned that title. I've never called it, not once in 20 years. Last Thanksgiving, my mother-in-law gave me a family heirloom, a silver locket that had belonged to Mark's grandmother. "Family should stay with family," she said as she clasped it around my neck. I nearly broke down at the dinner table. That night, as everyone slept, I sat in our backyard and considered calling Elizabeth, telling her about my children, my life. Instead, I buried the thought, like I always do. Family isn't just blood. It's who shows up, who stays. Elizabeth never did either. Mark's parents' 40th anniversary party had been on our calendar for months, a big celebration at their country club in Northern Virginia, with extended family flying in from California, Texas, and Illinois. Mark's mother, Barbara, had been planning it meticulously, the same way she approached everything in life. "It needs to be perfect," she kept saying during our weekly planning calls. "The Wilsons from the club will be there, and you know how they talk." The week before the party, Emma caught the flu. Our washing machine flooded the laundry room, and my biggest client at the accounting firm demanded an emergency audit. I was running on 4 hours of sleep and too much coffee when Barbara called, asking if I'd picked up my dress from the alterations shop. The pale blue one we agreed on, she reminded me. The one that doesn't make you look so tired. I'd forgotten about the dress entirely. In 15 years of marriage, I'd learned to navigate Barbara's subtle criticisms and exacting standards. Mark says she means well, but sometimes I wonder if she ever truly accepted me as good enough for her only son. The morning of the party, I was a bundle of nerves. Barbara had asked me to bring my famous chocolate raspberry cake, a recipe I'd actually gotten from a Food Network show, but had been claiming as a family recipe for years. Another small lie in my carefully constructed life. As I was finishing my makeup, my phone pinged with a text notification. The name on the screen made my heart stop. Elizabeth Morgan. In 15 years, she'd never reached out. The message was simple. I'm clean. 2 years now. In Virginia. Need to see you. My hands shook so badly I dropped my mascara. How did she know where I was? Had she been watching me? I deleted the message immediately, then jumped when Mark knocked on the bathroom door. You okay in there? We need to leave in 20. I stared at my reflection, at the woman I'd become, so different from the frightened girl in foster care. Fine, I called back, just finishing up. The country club was exactly as pretentious as I'd expected. Crystal chandeliers, white-gloved waiters, and Barbara holding court among her friends. Mark's brother Paul slapped him on the back as we arrived, then leaned in to kiss my cheek. The golden child arrives, Paul joked. Despite being the older brother, Paul had always lived in Mark's shadow. Mark with his surgical practice and perfect family, while Paul was twice divorced and struggling to keep his real estate business afloat. You look tense, Paul whispered, as Mark walked ahead to greet his parents. Barbara already criticizing your outfit? I forced a smile. Just tired. Emma's been sick. Well, there's plenty of champagne, he winked. Barbara's signature cure for everything except actual problems. During dinner, I sat between Mark's Aunt Judith, who spent 30 minutes showing me pictures of her Pomeranian's birthday party, and Barbara, who kept pointing out how lovely all the other wives looked in their dresses. I nodded and smiled, playing my part while my phone burned a hole in my clutch. Elizabeth was in Virginia, possibly nearby. After the main course, Barbara stood for a toast, glass raised high. Family, she began, is the most precious gift. Jim and I have been blessed with honest, loyal children who've never given us a moment's worry. Across the table, Paul rolled his eyes and took a large gulp of wine. And the wonderful spouses they've chosen, Barbara continued, nodding at me with her practiced smile, who've embraced our family traditions and values. My face felt hot. Every word felt like an indictment of my deception. I excused myself to the restroom, where I splashed cold water on my wrists and tried to breathe. When I pulled out my phone to check the time, there was another message from Elizabeth. I'm outside your in-laws' country club. Please, 5 minutes. I nearly dropped the phone in the sink. How did she know? How could she possibly know where I was? The answer hit me like a slap. Social media. Emma had posted about the anniversary party, tagging the country club's location. My carefully separated worlds were colliding, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. I walked out to the lobby on shaky legs, peering through the glass doors. And there she was, older, thinner than I remembered, but unmistakably Elizabeth, my birth mother, standing in the parking lot, smoking a cigarette, watching the entrance like a hawk. I ducked behind a column, heart racing. This couldn't be happening. Not today. Not with Mark's entire family inside, celebrating 40 years of perfect, normal marriage. I had 2 choices. Confront Elizabeth and risk everything, or return to the party and pretend I hadn't seen her. I chose the latter, slipping back into my seat just as the desserts were being served. My chocolate raspberry cake sat at the center of the table. Barbara beaming with pride as she told everyone about her daughter-in-law's special family recipe. "Samantha, darling," she said, cutting the first slice, "you simply must tell everyone where this recipe comes from. It's such a charming story." All eyes turned to me, waiting for the fictional tale I'd told so many times before. Through the window behind Barbara, I could see Elizabeth pacing in the parking lot, getting closer to the entrance with each pass. "Actually," I said, my voice surprisingly steady, "it's not a family recipe. I got it from a cooking show." The table fell silent. Barbara's smile froze on her face. "What do you mean?" she asked. "You told us it was your grandmother's recipe from Mississippi." "I don't have a grandmother from Mississippi," I said quietly. "I don't have any grandparents at all." And that's when the country club doors opened and Elizabeth Morgan walked in. Time seemed to slow as Elizabeth scanned the dining room, her eyes eventually finding me at the table surrounded by Mark's family. She looked better than I remembered, her hair neatly styled, wearing a modest dress that had seen better days but was clean and pressed. The track marks on her arms were hidden by a cardigan despite the June heat. "Samantha," she called out, her voice carrying across the hushed dining room. "Samantha, please." Every head turned, first to Elizabeth, then to me. I felt Mark's questioning gaze, saw Barbara's perfectly arched eyebrow, noticed Paul's sudden interest. "Who is that woman?" Barbara hissed. "Security should never have let her in." I stood up slowly, my napkin falling to the floor. "It's okay," I said, though nothing was okay. "I'll handle this." Elizabeth took a step forward, but a waiter blocked her path. "Ma'am, this is a private event." "That's my daughter," Elizabeth said, pointing at me. "Samantha Morgan, that's my girl." The room went completely silent. I could hear the ice melting in water glasses, the distant kitchen noises, my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. "Morgan?" Mark repeated. "Your maiden name is Peterson." I couldn't look at him. 15 years of marriage, and he didn't even know my real name. I'd legally changed it after college, shedding the last connection to Elizabeth. "I need to talk to my daughter," Elizabeth insisted, trying to push past the waiter. Something inside me snapped. All those years of hiding, of shame, of constructing the perfect lie, it all came crashing down in an instant. I walked across the dining room until I stood face to face with the woman who had given me life, then abandoned me. "Now?" I asked, my voice shaking. "You want to talk now, after 20 years?" Elizabeth's eyes filled with tears. "I'm clean, baby. 2 years sober. I've been making amends." "Amends?" I laughed, a harsh sound that didn't seem like it could come from me. "You sold me for drug money. You left me in an apartment alone for 3 days when I was 4 years old. The neighbors called the police when they heard me crying." Gasps echoed through the dining room. I could feel everyone watching, judging, piecing together the truth about the woman they thought they knew. "I was sick," Elizabeth pleaded. "The addiction." "I know about addiction," I cut her off. "I know it's a disease, but you had chances to get better. You had chances to be my mother. You chose drugs every single time." I turned to face Mark's family, my face burning with humiliation and a strange, unexpected relief. My name was Samantha Morgan. I grew up in foster care. My birth mother abandoned me when I was 4. The Petersons adopted me when I was 13, and they're the only real parents I've ever had. I took a deep breath. Everything else I've told you about my childhood, my family, it was all a lie. Barbara's hand flew to her pearl necklace. "But your parents, you said they died in a car accident." "I don't have parents who died in a car accident. I don't have grandparents from Mississippi or family trips to Lake Erie or any of the stories I've told you." My voice grew stronger with each truth. I come from nothing, from addiction and poverty and abandonment. Mark stood up slowly, his face unreadable. Sam, I lied to you from the day we met, I continued, unable to stop now that the dam had broken. Because I was ashamed. Because I thought if you knew the truth, you wouldn't want me. That no one would want me if they knew where I came from. Elizabeth reached for my arm. Samantha, please. I pulled away. I can't do this right now. I can't be what everyone needs me to be anymore. I walked out of the country club without looking back, ignoring the calls from Mark, the stunned silence from his family, the pleading voice of Elizabeth. In the parking lot, I fumbled for my keys, hands shaking so badly I dropped them twice. As I slid into the driver's seat, I caught a glimpse of myself in the rearview mirror. For the first time in 20 years, I was seeing myself clearly, not the carefully constructed persona I'd created, but the real Samantha Morgan, with all her broken pieces and lies and fears exposed to the world. I drove away from the country club, from my husband, from my birth mother, from the ruins of the life I'd built on sand instead of stone. I had no destination in mind. I just needed to breathe, to think, to figure out what came next now that the truth was out. I drove for hours, eventually finding myself at Huntley Meadows Park, a marshy wilderness in the middle of Alexandria suburbia. I used to bring the kids here on weekend mornings to spot herons and turtles. Now, in the fading evening light, I walked the boardwalk alone, phone buzzing constantly in my purse. 27 missed calls from Mark, 3 from Elizabeth, 1 from Paul, surprisingly. Around midnight, I checked into a Holiday Inn near Springfield. Sitting on the edge of the bed, I finally called Mark back. "Where are you?" His voice was hoarse. "Are you safe?" "I'm safe," I assured him. "I just needed space." "You could have told me, Sam." He sounded more hurt than angry. 15 years, and I didn't know who you really were. "I am who you think I am," I insisted. "Everything about us is real. I just changed the backstory." "That's not how marriage works." He paused. "Your Elizabeth is still here, at my parents' house." That surprised me. "Why?" "She refused to leave until she knew you were okay. She's been telling us everything about what happened when you were little." I closed my eyes, imagining Elizabeth sitting in Barbara's immaculate living room, spilling the ugly truths of my childhood. "Barbara's been Googling foster care statistics all night," Mark continued, with a hint of dark humor. "Did you know she's never met anyone who was in foster care before? At least, not that she knew of." The next morning, I met Paul for coffee at a diner, halfway between Alexandria and Arlington. Of all people, he was the last one I expected to reach out. "You know," he said, stirring his coffee endlessly, "I've always felt like the family fraud. Golden boy Mark and his perfect wife, and then there's me, the screw-up who can't keep a marriage together or a business afloat." I stared at him, not understanding. "It's refreshing, actually. Finding out you've been full of shit all these years?" He grinned. "Makes me feel less alone." I couldn't help but laugh, a real laugh that released some of the tension I'd been carrying. "Barbara is in full damage control mode," Paul continued. "She's worried what the Wilsons will think." "Of course she is. Mark is just processing. He's not angry, Sam. He's sad you didn't trust him." Later that day, I met Elizabeth at a park near Mark's parents' house. She sat on a bench, feeding squirrels with breadcrumbs. "You look just like my mother," she said when I approached. "Your grandmother. She died when you were 2. I sat beside her, maintaining distance. "How did you find me?" "I've known where you were for years." She didn't look at me. "I saw your wedding announcement in the paper. Mark Wilson, surgeon, marries Samantha Peterson. I knew it was you. And you waited until now to show up?" "I wasn't clean before." She finally met my eyes. "I didn't deserve to be in your life. Maybe I still don't." We talked for 2 hours. She told me about my half-siblings, Jasmine, 19, and Tyler, 17, both adopted by families in Maryland. She showed me pictures on her prepaid phone. They had my eyes, my father's chin. Family I never knew existed. They know about you, Elizabeth said. I told them they have a big sister who's smart and successful. They want to meet you someday. The thought terrified and intrigued me in equal measure. That evening, I returned to our house. Jake answered the door, his face solemn. Dad told us, he said simply, about your real mom, about the foster homes. I nodded, waiting for his judgment. Why didn't you tell us? He asked. Did you think we wouldn't love you anymore? The question, so direct, so reminiscent of how I'd felt at his age, broke something in me. I pulled him into a hug and cried for the first time since the country club. I was ashamed, I admitted. And after a while, the lie was easier than the truth. That's stupid, Mom, he said with teenage bluntness. You're always telling us to be honest, and you've been lying our whole lives. His words stung, but he was right. Over the next few weeks, my carefully constructed life transformed. Mark and I started couples therapy. I began individual sessions, working through the abandonment issues I'd buried for decades. Barbara sent me books about foster care, her way of trying to understand. The most surprising change came from Emma. My quiet middle child started researching foster care organizations, eventually dragging me to a volunteer orientation at a local agency. I want to help kids like you, Mom, she explained, kids who need families. In July, I organized a dinner with Elizabeth at our home. Mark was hesitant but supportive. The kids were curious about this grandmother they never knew existed. I set boundaries. She could visit occasionally, but she needed to maintain her sobriety, and our relationship would develop slowly, if at all. Elizabeth arrived with small gifts for each child. Nothing expensive, just thoughtful tokens. For Jake, a book about astronomy she'd found at a secondhand store, remembering that I'd loved the stars as a child. For Emma, a beaded bracelet she'd made in her therapy group. For Lily, a small stuffed rabbit that looked suspiciously like one I'd had as a very young child. I kept it, Elizabeth admitted when I questioned her privately. It was the only thing of yours I didn't sell or lose. The dinner was awkward, tense at times, but also healing in ways I hadn't anticipated. Elizabeth didn't try to be more than what she was, a recovering addict trying to make amends, not expecting forgiveness, but hoping for a chance. As summer turned to fall, another unexpected development emerged. Paul, of all people, started dating a woman he met at an AA meeting, a recovery connection that led him to volunteer as Elizabeth's temporary sponsor when hers relapsed. The two formed an unlikely friendship that seemed to benefit them both. In September, Jasmine, my half-sister, reached out through social media. We arranged to meet at a coffee shop in Baltimore, both nervous, both curious. She had my laugh, my tendency to talk with her hands. We promised to stay in touch, to build whatever relationship felt natural. 1 year after the country club revelation, Barbara called with a surprising request. We're redoing our anniversary party, she announced. The first one ended dramatically. We'd like you to bring your mother, your birth mother, she clarified, and your siblings, if they're comfortable. Families should be together. It wasn't a perfect Hollywood ending. Elizabeth still struggled with sobriety, sometimes disappearing for weeks before resurfacing with apologies and promises. My relationship with Mark had changed, deeper in some ways, more cautious in others. The children asked hard questions I didn't always have answers for. But there was an authenticity to my life that had been missing before. No more invented stories, no more fear of being discovered. I was Samantha Morgan Peterson, with all the complicated history that name carried. The silver locket Mark's mother had given me, the one meant to stay in the family, now held 3 photos: the Petersons who adopted me, Mark and our children, and a faded picture of Elizabeth holding me as a baby before addiction took her away. 3 chapters of my life, no longer separated by lies. 5 minutes with my unlocked phone changed everything. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if Jake hadn't seen Elizabeth's name that day, if I could have maintained my carefully constructed facade indefinitely. But the truth has a way of surfacing, whether we're ready for it or not. My son asked me recently if I regret that day, if I wish I could go back and lock my phone before walking away. I told him no. Living authentically, even with all the mess and complications, is better than living in fear of being discovered. The humiliation of that night at the country club was excruciating, but the freedom that came afterward was worth it. We all have secrets, parts of ourselves we hide away because we're ashamed or afraid. But those secrets don't disappear, they shape us from the shadows. Bringing them into the light doesn't erase the past, but it does allow us to move forward without the weight of deception. If you've been carrying a secret that's become too heavy to bear, maybe it's time to set it down. The people who truly love you might surprise you with their capacity for understanding. And if you're watching this because you're in foster care or you came from a difficult beginning, your past doesn't define your future. You are more than where you came from. If this story resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe for more content about family dynamics and personal growth. Share your own experiences in the comments below. Your story might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today.